everyone, are you worried you might get stumped in a job interview when asked a behavioral interview question? Well, welcome to Q&A. Today, I have Chris, who sent in an emailed question, and it looks like this. He says, "Hello, my name is Chris, and I wanted to share with you an interview question that I was completely unprepared for." Well, Chris, you're not the only one. Here we go. I was working in customer service, and I saw a job posting for an interesting position that paid more money, and was working in an insurance company that involved customer service and sales. Okay, great. That's a great category of jobs. So I applied and was called for an interview and went the next day. Okay, I'd say on about the third interview question, the interviewer asked, "So, tell me about a time when you missed a deadline and how you responded to the situation." Excellent. Okay, so this obviously is a behavioral interview question. Okay, whenever they start a question with "tell me about a time," that's a behavioral question. The answer you give is going to be a story, and it's going to be a story from your past. That's what a behavioral question is. Now, I've recently done a video on how to prepare for behavioral interview questions, and very quick recap of that was the answer is how to prepare for these things. Well, you rehearse 10 stories from your past, 5 success stories, 5 failure stories, okay? And you come prepared to the job interview with these on the tip of your mind. And any behavioral question they ask you, you pull out this story or one of those stories that best fits the question they're asking you, and you use that to answer. Okay, so they asked Chris this question, when you missed a deadline and how you responded to the situation. Now, Chris says, "I froze. I never had a job with deadlines before, only basic customer service positions." Okay, fair enough. "I must have paused too long because the interviewer said, 'Oh, come on now, Chris. We have all missed deadlines before.' I got the feeling he thought I was stalling to try and make something up, but I wasn't. I was really trying to think of something, but I couldn't. And as you can imagine, I didn't get the job." Well, Chris, first of all, I want to say you're not alone here, okay? And a lot of recruiters think that they're so clever when they ask these types of questions. These questions are very popular. Behavioral interview questions have been very popular from the late 1970s on. And if you go to a job interview today, chances are that you're going to encounter behavioral interview questions. And like I've said previously in videos, there's literally 1,000 of these types of questions that you can find on the internet. And that's not even talking about the questions that an interviewer can just make up. Okay, so there's no way to prepare for every possible type of behavioral question that they may ask you. And this is a common scenario where they ask you something and you're like, it's also kind of arrogant of a lot of recruiters that they think that you can recall your entire career and every single thing you've ever done at the drop of a hat in an interview with a stranger when you're put on the spot and the stakes are high and you're nervous, okay? I would argue that unless you're a sociopath of some kind, this is going to be a challenge for most people, okay? So let's read on here. Chris says, "What are some of the best ways to handle questions where you are blindsided?" I guess blindsided. Simply because you literally have not encountered situations the interviewer is talking about. Oh, thanks, Chris. Okay. Without any further ado, here's what I would say. Okay. Now, you have come prepared to the interview with 10 behavioral stories, 10 stories from your past that you can pull out at any moment to answer any question. Now, obviously, the ideal answer would be for you to use one of those. Okay, that goes without saying. Now, if you can't think of a story from your past, but you know what you should do in the situation they're asking about, one thing you can say is you could say, "Well, I know I've been in that situation before. A specific situation with all the details doesn't immediately leap to mind right now when you're kind of putting me on the spot, but this is how I would handle it. Okay, I would do this, 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 this. Okay, so that's a good format to use when you know what you should say, but you can't think of a story from your past with all the details and all the specifics that you could just repeat at the drop of a hat in the moment. Okay, so that's one way to try and manage the situation when you're asked this type of question and you're kind of stumped with what to say. Now, as I said, that's assuming you know what to say. Okay. Now, let's pretend that you don't quite know exactly what they're wanting to hear. Okay, and neither can you think of a story from your past where you've done it. Well, another alternative is to say, look, I'm sure I've been in that situation before. Nothing leaps to mind right now with all the specifics, but I've seen that happen a lot of times to others, and this is the way that I would handle it. And then you say what you would do. Okay? And just take your best shot. I know a lot of people recommend that, you'd say, well, I don't know, but I can get back to you. And I'm not saying that doesn't work. That might work. But personally, for me, I wouldn't recommend that. I would try and give them an answer. Because if you can't answer it, period, that signals something bad. That's kind of a red flag. At least that's how a lot of recruiters will interpret it. Okay? Now, let's come back to this for a second. Now, tell me about a time when you missed a deadline and how you responded to this situation. Now, personally, if I was asked this question in a job interview, okay, about how I missed a deadline and how I responded, okay, and let's pretend that I didn't have a story from my past that I could pull out and explain, I would say something like this, okay? Well, I know I've been in that situation before. I can't recall a specific situation with all the details that I can just tell you in the moment here after being put on the spot. But here's what I would do, okay? First of all, presumably the deadline that I missed was somewhat important and it was assigned by my immediate supervisor. Okay, number one, I would go to my immediate supervisor. I would inform them. I would say, look, I know you wanted this by this time. Unfortunately, that time has passed. I don't quite have it ready, and I apologize. I realize that this is important. Now, very briefly, this is what happened. Maybe something came up. It was very high priority. I had to work on that, and it just wasn't possible to complete this on time. Okay, however, I want you to know that I'm working hard on this, and I will get it to you as soon as I can, and I'm expecting that to be by the end of today. I'm going to give them a specific time. Okay? So you will have that. And once again, I apologize and I appreciate your patience. I hope that works for you. And then I'll allow them to respond. And, if they want to react to that, that's great. Okay? But that's essentially what I would do, okay, if I was in that situation. And then it goes without saying, I would prioritize getting that particular thing done quickly and deliver it by the time that I said I would. Okay, so that's how I would respond to that. Now, a larger issue here, a larger question is how do you prepare for behavioral interview questions? I previously said that you need 5 success stories and 5 failure stories of things that did not go well. But the question might be, what specific types of situations should I be looking for and try to find examples of and try to commit to memory and, so I have them ready. Well, I've created a handy dandy little list here, okay, that in my opinion, these are the top areas of behavioral interview questions. This is maybe a little more detailed than it needs to be, but a very popular category of behavioral interview question that they could ask you about are conflicts, okay? So conflicts with a team, conflicts with your boss, conflicts with a coworker. If you're a manager, conflicts with a subordinate. If you deal with customers or clients, conflict with a client. Okay, how did you handle it? What did you do? How did you smooth it over? Okay, and a conflict with someone who's a different type of person than you. Okay, so either they have a different personality or a different style of working or a different style of communicating. Okay, if you had a conflict with them, what did you do? How did you resolve it? Okay, so think about this when you're choosing your stories, okay, from your past as part of your preparation for job interviews, in particular, behavioral questions, okay? Another big category that's very important that a lot of people should try and think of is a time when you failed. Okay, now specifically, a time when you failed with work. So like you were given an assignment and you just couldn't do it. It was beyond you or something. How did you handle it? Okay, you failed with a deadline, like this question. Okay, you failed at meeting expectations from your boss or your supervisor. Okay, how did that go? What did you do? How did you smooth it over? Okay. Failed with communication. Tell me about a time you tried to communicate with somebody and obviously it didn't work. The message was garbled. There was a misunderstanding and, it led to some problems. How did you resolve it? Okay. Tell me about a time that you failed with time management. Okay. That's a little bit like the first one here, failed with work or failed with a deadline. Because this is asking about tell me about a time when, you just couldn't complete everything in the time allotted, okay? And maybe you were disorganized or something like that. Okay, so these would be scenarios to think about when you're preparing stories for a job interview. And you don't have to plan for all of these, but just have some of these in your list of stories. Okay, now other areas that they may ask you about is stress. Tell me a time you were under stress. How did you handle it? Okay, tell me about a time that you had to deal with change. Maybe your job changed. Maybe the people you deal with changed. Maybe policies or rules change. How did you deal with that? Maybe your tools changed. Okay, the tools that they gave you to do your job, maybe they changed the tools on you. What'd you do? Okay, this kind of blurs the line with some of the others up here, but a time you had to smooth over someone who was upset, right? You had to pacify somebody. You had to persuade them to see it your way. Okay, that's another popular thing. If you work in customer service, that might be kind of something that they're probably going to ask you about. And then finally, you could get behavioral questions on this stuff, right? Tell me about a time you had to persuade somebody. Okay, how did you do it, right? Tell me about a time that you had to give a presentation or you had to present something. To an audience, to clients, to coworkers, to your boss. What'd you do? How'd you prepare? How did it go? And tell me about a time when you had to tap into some creativity to solve a problem at work. Okay, so maybe that would be an example of, they gave you a task. They didn't tell you exactly how to do it. You had to figure out how to do it, but you did it and you made it work and it was a success. Tell me about a time when you did that. Okay, so these are pretty much the general categories. If you think of this stuff when you are preparing for your behavioral interview questions, okay, that will go a long way into helping you have in your arsenal of things to say, okay, things that are relevant that they're going to ask you directly about, and then you could just pull out one of these stories and it will fit like a glove and it will answer the question really well. Okay, so that's what I would say how to prepare. And one other thing I'd like to mention is that you see in these categories here, you're talking about conflict, you're talking about a time you failed, okay? Now, these tend to be the negative questions, okay? These are not asking you about a success you had, okay? All behavioral questions you should answer with a story that ends in either how you succeeded, or if you can't say that because they're asking you about how you failed, right? You say what you learned, okay? So, I tell me about a time when you didn't meet a deadline. Well, okay, here's the story. I didn't meet this deadline. I apologize. But what I learned was I really learned time management skills. I learned the importance of time management skills. And that's what's made me very proactive in getting my work done as soon as I can while maintaining quality so that I don't leave everything to the last minute. And that way, this will never happen again. And it never has. Something like that. Okay, you always want to end on a positive. You don't want to just tell a story about how you failed and that was it. You failed. I'm no good. Right? You don't want to say stuff like that. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. That's more on behavioral questions. And hopefully that answers Chris's question. and that answers a little more on how to prepare for behavioral interview questions in a job interview. So hopefully that makes sense. I want to thank you all for your time. I hope that was helpful. And subscribe to my channel, join my channel as a member. And if you really want to go deeper, I do have a course called Get Hired. There's a link in the description. I've had like 80 people take that course, and I've had something like 55 to 60 emails after the fact saying, wow, I got a job partly because of the material in your course. So that's very gratifying. So it's obviously working. So if you want to go deeper and you want to learn how to do all this stuff in one place, check out my course. Thank you very much. You guys are awesome. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care.